Welcome to Qdrant Essentials with Jina AI. In this session, I will demonstrate how to use our latest model, Jina Embeddings v4, together with the Qdrant vector database. First of all, what does Jina AI provide? If you have read the Qdrant documentation, you came across the representation revolution. In order to use a vector database, you need to transform any input into a vector by the means of deep neural networks. These deep neural networks is what Jina AI provides. Our latest model, Jina Embeddings v4, supports text and images, both on the document side as well as on the query side. So if you have a database of text, you can search them, for example, by text queries. Or you could search your image library of visually rich documents either by text or images themselves. We embed all data in the same vector space, and as such, you can even save text and image embeddings in the same database. When it comes to using our models, you can either use our API or host the models themselves. When using our API, you first need to send your documents to our API in order to get the embeddings. Afterwards, you can store the documents, including the embeddings, in the Qdrant vector database. When querying, the same apply. First, you send the queries to our API, and afterwards, you can query the database. By the way, you get 10 million free tokens when using our API for testing. So now have a look at our code. When you go to the Qdrant documentation, under Build, and then Embeddings and Jina Embeddings, you find a list of our models and some information about these models. I highly recommend to use our latest model, Jina Embeddings v4. It is the most powerful we have. Afterwards, you will find several more information how to use our models and the properties of them. At the bottom, there is quite some example code. So let's use the text-to-image retrieval example code and have a look at it. First, in this code, you need to use your Jina API key. Then afterwards, you need to define your data. And when you've done this, you need to call our API and extract the embeddings from the API response. When you've done this, you can upsert everything into Qdrant, as you're used to do. Doing search, you obviously need a search query, and then you can call the API again and extract the query embeddings. Then you can search and do with the results as you please. For example, printing them, showing them on your website or in your application. Now let's have a look at the Jina website, where you can find more information about our models. First of all, you click on API, then on Embeddings. Here the Jina Embeddings v4 is pre-selected. On downstream task, you can select different tasks which our model can perform. Since we are using it for retrieval, the first two options are interesting for us. Retrieval.query, when you want to query, and retrieval.passage, when you want to embed documents. So let's choose retrieval.passage. Afterwards, you can select from multiple options and multiple features that our model provides. For example, late chunking, when you have long documents and you want these long documents to automatically be chunked. Or multivector, in the case you have visually rich documents and you want them to be embedded with multivectors. Once you've selected the features, you can export your code, for example, to Python. Once this is done, we can copy the parameters we need and go back to our editor. Here, at the top of the code, we can replace the API parameters, and then you add here your data and again your token, and then you can go and use the newly selected parameters. Don't worry, I will rotate my token after the video recording, so nobody can do malicious things with it. After showing how to use our model with Qdrant, I want to have a look at a special use case, where our model shows exceptional performance. If you have visually rich documents, like papers or graphs with text or tables, you can use a special feature to improve the performance dramatically. You can use so-called multivector embeddings that utilize late interaction. So what is a multivector embedding? First, let's have a look at what is a normal embedding, a single vector embedding. When you have a query and a document, usually you get exactly one embedding per query and one embedding per document. and then these two are compared to get a score how well they match. When you use multi-vector embeddings, you get multiple vectors per document and multiple vectors per query. This allows capturing way more details and for a much better search. In benchmarks, this usually leads to an increase in typical retrieval metrics by 5 to 10%. So now let's have a look how to use multivectors. Again, in the Qdrant documentation, under Qdrant, Concepts, Vectors, Multivectors, Qdrant has done a good job explaining how multivectors work. At the bottom, you see code examples, and let's use them directly in our code. First, we need to replace the creation of the database. So, here we go. Next, we need to replace the upsert. Here, you see these are not one vector per document, but actually multiple vectors. When in our API call, you define return multivector to true, then the embeddings you get here have exactly the correct format. So you don't have to worry, you can directly replace here these vectors with image embeddings. Last but not least, we need to paste the code for the query. Again here, you need to replace it with the query embeddings from the Jina API. I leave it to you to figure out how to call the API correctly. Thanks a lot for your attention, and I wish you a lot of success using Jina AI embeddings together with the Qdrant vector database.